Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Starting from Scratch podcast with me, your host, John Kleisch, on episode number 5. Holy cow, it's been 5 episodes. Before we get into it, I noticed I have recorded 4 total episodes with the exact same outfit on. And I realized after I did that, post fact of recording that episode. So today, I went through and looked at every single podcast I've done so far and made sure that I picked out a new shirt for you guys. So, might be unbelievable, but I do own more than 2 separate outfits. Thought I would fill you guys in on that. So, exciting stuff going on in my life, in my world, so much so that I don't even know how to describe it. But what we'll do here in this episode, we're going to go over a few different things. I got some leases signed for Grand Avenue, which is excelente. I got a retrade on the overall deal to make that much more of an efficient deal for us. And the raising money side of things for commercial real estate. So I must say that I am learning at such a rapid clip. It's funny when things are happening to you. The commercial real estate deals are unfolding this is all stuff that I knew prior to, but whenever you are in the trenches and you're fighting hand-to-hand combat in this space, everything your thinking doesn't really work that well, and everything that happens is kind of like, oh, I can't believe that happened to me. And it's like, well, hey, guess what? This has happened to me 500 other times before. It just happened in a different type of business, or the scenario has played out many, many, many times, just a different players, if you will. So I guess the exciting news is right here. I have in my hand 2 leases signed for the 2 bigger spots on the property. Now, these are the meat and potatoes of our property. We were potentially going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 different spots for lease. 2 of the bigger ones are here, tenant 1 and tenant 2. The other spots were covered outdoor space, I guess, if you will, with no technical interior space. And we worked out a deal that tenant 1 was going to absorb tenant 3's spot, and then tenant 4 spot got split into 2 different spaces. I had a gentleman that was actually working and living on the property who was very interested in moving forward. We had a handshake deal in place, and I just found out yesterday on September 16th that he is no longer going to stay. So that was a little bit of a blow. That was $2,000 a month coming to us. And unfortunately, he's no longer on board. Totally fine. I didn't really get an exact story. I've been lied to by every single tenant on earth, so it's hard to actually believe what they say at this point. But regardless, overall, I'm not too upset about it. Having somebody living on the property isn't really overly exciting to me. He's been there for 5 years. That was nice, but I know that other tenants probably wouldn't appreciate that so much. And ultimately, I know another big factor was that the paint booth, we signed an exclusive use paint booth to tenant 1, actually, but they do know tenant 2, so they will be able to interchangeably use that. But on paper, tenant 1 is exclusively using that paint booth, which is fine. So I believe we left off the other podcast. I was going to the shop to negotiate these terms in person, and I'm trying to think of a more intense negotiation that I've had, and I don't know if I've had one. It was with both tenants. One of them brought their spouse, and there was another gentleman that was responsible for basically brokering the deal, helping them out get into a lease. It was actually their former landlord. So most of the communication was with me and him, and we were back and forth on everything. But there was a couple times where I told him, guys, I just can't do that. That is not going to work. And literally walking out the door, and they're like, hey, hold on. They had a little meeting, came up, offered some different things. So I don't know if it's going to be interesting to go over all of the exact details. However, I feel like it might be a little bit important. So basically, they wanted an insane discount on rent. That, oh, they didn't think it's worth that much. I thought it was worth much more. I feel like we under rented this below market by about 20 to 30% would be my guess. And the main reason that we were okay with that is that we were walking into this deal on day one with signed leases with positive cash flow. Now we're talking, based on my estimations, under renting it by about, say, $3,000 total between both spots. And that's like the market rent. So to get that market rent, this place is definitely a little bit rougher around the edges. If you've been following me, you've seen the pictures. It's been neglected. It's not in good shape at all. Everyone knows it. And it's also hard to rent out a spot for full market rent when it's kind of run down like that. But ultimately, it came down to, okay, are we losing that $3,000 a month? Yes and no. I believe in order to get that $3,000 a month, we would need to have cleaned up the property, done a lot of major repairs that we're not doing now because of the tenants. That's their responsibility. But ultimately, we would need to get in there. We would be getting $0 in rent the first few months and then outlaying cash somewhere to the tune of, I would guesstimate, at least $30,000. So option two would be to have $0 in cash flow at a burn rate of about $9,140 per month. If my memory serves me correctly, it's really close to that number. And forking out $30,000 to spruce up the place and then waiting to find a tenant, which I imagine would take somewhere 3 to 5, 6 months is probably pretty accurate. So outlaying 30 grand, coming up with 50 grand in the operating cost, the monthly cost between the monthly payment to the seller and insurance and taxes. Oh, at the end of the day, we were going back and forth. It's like, okay, cool. Well, that 54 grand that we would be putting out plus the 30 grand, that's $84,000 on 3 grand a month. That would take almost about 3 years to make up for that money anyways. And in the position that we're in, we had someone that was actively willing to move forward right now, walking into that deal with fully lease assigned and cash flowing positively was very hard to say no to. And the other issue being that, like I mentioned, we had 4 spots that we were going to rent. Tenant 1 needed the tenant 3 space as well, which to me, he wanted to under rent tenant 1 by about $2,000. I was planning on renting out tenant 3 spot for about $2,500 a month, which is a lot of money when you're talking about a deal like this. And so that was projected to be about $11,500 of rent between tenant 1 and tenant 3. He wanted to rent that all for somewhere to the tune of about $7,000. And that's where I was like, this ain't happening. There's just no way I'm going to let that fly. That's way too much of a discount to rent. And that's when it was like, I don't care. At that point, it's going to make my deal not good. So I'm not doing that. So then ultimately he came up a little bit. So tenant 1, this is what we came up with. For the first 3 months, $6,500 a month. And that gets us through the year, putting down a security deposit and then their first month's rent. They'll end up getting about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks free because we're closing on this thing on Friday the 19th. And then their first rent payment is not due till October 1st. So about 2 weeks free rent. And then year 1, $2,500 per month. So that's January 2026 in about 3 months. And then year 2, there is a $500 bump beginning of year 2 plus a 3% bump. And then the following year, another 3% bump on that too. Year 3, a monthly rent is going to be $8,472, which is about $972 more than their first year. So that's pretty attractive. This deal definitely gets better over time. And then on tenant 2, I know I was trying to get $4,500. We settled at $4,200. Oh, so for the first 3 months, they're at $3,800. And the first year, starting in 3 months, is $4,200 with 3% bumps up there, which their final lease would be since starting January 2028. So overall, those last 3 years of rent, we're getting somewhere to the tune of about $250, about $1,200 more dollars just from those spots, which ultimately adds up to about $160,000 more in equity in that building overall. So that's the beautiful thing about commercial real estate, which I'm learning, is that those little bump increases end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars in our pocket. Now, the plan, after knowing these gentlemen and speaking with them and seeing their past history, I know that they are wanting to be long-term tenants. They wanted to even sign to have an option at another 3 years. And I told them, absolutely not at this rate. I will gladly rent to you guys again, but I can't keep giving you guys a 20% discount on rent. I was very adamant about not doing that because I felt like I was already giving them a deal, signing a 6-year potential deal at 20% under rent, not cool. At year 3, I have a lot more room to stand on as far as negotiating is concerned. I'll have 3 years of experience under my belt. I'll have lots of cash flow. I'll have lots of equity. And I'll be a lot more well-versed and feeling comfortable to really drop the hammer on these guys and get, if not market rent, get pretty dang close to market rent. So I'm hoping by then, we're looking 20% increase. 20% increase. That'd be about another $2,000, which is another, few $100,000 in equity. So we can pull that off by the end of this year 3. We're going to have an extra $400,000 of equity, which is just insane, which makes these deals very attractive. So overall, I am happy with where I'm at. It was definitely less than we were hoping for. We were hoping to walk into something of like $16,000 worth of revenue, and we're going to be walking into $11,700, which is totally fine. It still cash flows. Our expenses are $9,140. We're bringing in $11,700. So let's do some quick cool guy math here. And that's about $2,560 worth of positive cash flow after all expenses are taken care of, which walking into a spot right off day one, really, really happy with. Also, too, wanted to do a triple net lease. We did not get to a triple net lease agreement. However, the terms are very similar to a triple net. The only things that we're responsible for are the roof, which we're redoing, AC units, which we're redoing most of those, and swamp coolers, and the exterior. And all of that is good to go. It's going to be straightforward. We're fixing up a lot of that. So the main point was that I did not want to be getting calls. The light bulb's out. This is leaking. That is leaking, whatever that may be. So that was good on that end of things. So overall, I feel pretty comfortable. Now, it is 2 weeks after we've signed the agreement. I have one security deposit. The other tenant has been a lot more difficult to work with, which is another issue that I've realized, that collecting money from people is a bear. It's not very fun. They, people don't want to fork out their money. And kind of an oversight that I had on my end, because whenever I have been a tenant, I have been very adamant about making sure my security deposit is in right away, paying the monthly rent on time, having no issues, being a very, very good tenant. Now, if you've been in real estate, you know that not every tenant is like that. And there's problems that come along with it, not picking up my calls and ignoring me and things like that. So the other day I just showed up to the property, talked to him. He expressed some concerns. We talked about it. Everything should be fine. The guy spent $20,000 on moving all of his cars, all of his tools over to the property already. So at this point, I know he's going to be fine. He's not going to stiff me on the rent. His main concern is that we haven't closed on the property yet, so he didn't feel comfortable putting down a security deposit. Even though we talked about that prior to signing the agreement, it is what it is at this point. Lost sleep over it, stressed out, thinking I'm already going to have to evict this guy. But at this point, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And if it is, it is. So be it. That is how the cookie crumbles in this business. But great lessons learned there. I had some weird feelings about these tenants prior to, and a lot of those are coming to fruition. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of it has to chalk up to, A, we don't own the building yet, so they're kind of weary of us. And B, they've just been really, really, really stressed out, been moving, 14, 16 hours a day, getting all of their stuff. He had something like 27 cars, so we had to clean up our property a little bit, had to hire a bunch of tow truck drivers, moving back and forth. has been a lot, so I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt on that. The other tenant, I reached out to him, met him up right away at his current shop, and he cut me that security deposit. So that's all good on that end. And then other drama, crazy stuff. Tenant 2 gets to the spot, and they all had an agreement with the current tenant that they can move in already. So now it's been 2 weeks and they should have been already able to move stuff in. This guy shows up. I'm not able to move my stuff in, blah, blah, blah. I need a free month of rent. If I can't get a free month of rent, I'm going to cancel. So I've been dealing with that, talking that guy off a cliff, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, was able to talk to the current tenants, and they're going to get all of their stuff out of tenant 2 spot on Friday. That way it gives him a couple weeks in order to move all of his stuff in. Now, that might not be enough time. I don't know, but at this point, not my problem. I'm not letting this guy out of the lease. I'm not giving him a free month. At this point, he can deal with it because he's a big boy. So that's pretty much everything on the tenant side of things. Learning that I don't like tenants. I don't like to deal with tenants. And in fact, if there's a way moving forward on our next deal that I don't have to deal with any of this stuff moving forward, I would like to do that. I would like to pay whatever that costs because I'm not interested in really doing that type of stuff, especially the ongoing issues. I don't want to deal with that at all. That is not my strong suit. It is not fun. It wears on me, and it's annoying. So those are my great lessons learned on that end of things. So deals coming down to the wire. I got these guys signed up about 3, 4, 5 days prior to the end of due diligence, which was great and made us feel pretty good about it, especially because the current tenant wanted nothing to do with us. Another great lesson learned is that if you're taking over a building with tenants that are highly under rented, the fact that you think you're going to walk in there and bump them to market rent and they're going to love it, absolutely not. I've heard stories and stories and stories from people that I've spoken to. That just doesn't happen. Very, very, very difficult, and understandably why. I don't think I need to get into it, but that's a very, very good lesson I learned moving forward. Even though the broker and the current owner had those conversations with that tenant, when that time came, push comes to shove, there was zero cooperation on the tenant side. So definitely something to think about, and will always be in the back of my mind moving forward, that you will have to be prepared to lose a lot of tenants when you make a bump in rent. Even though it makes sense to you, it does not make sense to them. It's not a logical decision. They've been getting such a great deal for such a long time that they are not willing to give that up and pay the same rent for that same spot, or pay a much higher rent for the same spot, is what I've learned. So typically now we're down to the wire. This is the last day of due diligence. Now, I know that we're going to be moving forward with this deal. Even if we didn't get these leases signed, it's such a good deal that we're very comfortable with it and moving forward as it sits. But once you get that lease signed, it felt really good. Now I wanted to make this deal sweeter. Now, I know the previous buyer, he went for a massive retrade to the tune of like $250,000 plus, because of the condition of the building, and the current sellers said, F no, there's no way. We're done with this deal. We're not giving you $250,000 off the price. So I already knew that I was working with that as being a max, and I've been kind of prepping the broker for what my findings have been. And like I mentioned, every time I spent more time there or uncovered more things, it was getting worse and worse and worse of a deal. So I outlaid everything to him as I was finding it, slowly prepping the broker for the price reduction or retrade. And as it got closer, things were popping up, like that block wall, and fixing some electrical issues and a water heater and laying down some rock for the tenants. So capital expenditures were going up. And what was more important to us is if that we did get a price reduction, that's cool, right? That's great. But this is a building we're going to hold on to for a long time. We have a note with a balloon of 7 years. So I imagine that's going to be at least the minimum hold time, call it maybe 5 years. But if we got to say $150,000 price reduction, that helps us out, not today, a little bit on the down payment of things, but that really helps you out when you go out for a refinance or for the sale, which is never a bad thing. However, getting money today was very important for this deal. So what we did, instead of reducing the price, all we wanted to do was do a reduction in down payment, or a credit, if you will. I prefer to call it a down payment reduction. So Currently, we had it at $200,000. I went for $100,000 reduction in down payment, and I went through all of the reasons on why exactly that I needed it. The list goes on. The roof, the ACs, the swamp coolers, the tenants, the block wall, the stucco, the paint, electrical, water heater, the parking lot, and the tenants being the main focus of it, of assuming all of this risk with not having a lease in place and so on and so forth. The broker had it well received. He pitched it. There's two sellers, the father and son. He pitched it to the father and texted me, said, hey, everything went pretty good. It went over pretty well. Just got to talk to the son. And then it kind of came down to it. And they're like, nope, that's too much. We'll give you, I forget, I think they came back at $25,000 reduction in down payment. And I knew there was some more wiggle room in there. So I went back with my favorite strategy. I also I pitched a couple different options like, hey, how about we do this $35,000 reduction in down payment, but we delay 6 payments. That way it's about, 42 grand ish that would save us over the course of those 6 months. That really didn't go over well. So then it was perfect. Hey, let's just do this, make it easy. $47,211 reduction in down payment. Now, I really like the number 47, and I always like very specific numbers. I learned that from Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss, great book. And 211 is also a number that I use all the time, but sounds very specific. It was a good number, and eventually they agreed. We signed the addendum 7 minutes prior to that due diligence period expiring. We got it done at like 4:53 p.m. and expired at 5. So pretty nerve-wracking, pretty exciting. I love doing negotiating. That's kind of my strong suit. So I loved every minute of that. That was great. And especially when we got that yes. That down payment reduction is absolutely huge. So what does that do? That allows us to, get more money right off of the clip. We're still going to raise that $400,000, but that puts more money in our pocket for not only the repairs, it also will allow us to leave a good amount of money in the bank account for ongoing expenses, maybe any disasters where maybe if a tenant did have to get an evicted or eviction, we have that backup capital, and then it could potentially even put some money in our pocket. So not only are we buying this building, we're actually, potentially here could put 20, 30 grand in our pockets upon the closing of the deal. So that's why we went after that down payment reduction, and it worked out really, really well for both parties. At the end of the day, they're still getting their $1.5 million. And we're able to get a huge buffer on the front end of things. So that was very, very exciting. Now, the capital raising piece is something that I've never done before. That's why I brought on my partner, Mr. John Heisler. He has done this many, many times, and even he had trouble with the raising capital. Now, the deal itself is amazing. It's great. It makes a lot of sense. What he's running into is that he got 2 verbal acceptances from some investors that he's worked with in the past that have been in his deals, have made a lot of money. They talked to him about the deal, and these guys were so good with him that they're like, dude, I don't even need to see the pitch deck. I don't have any questions. What you're telling me sounds good. I'm good. And then John will continuously follow up with that person, and one of them, their life circumstances changed. Like, I believe it was, my wife wants to buy a house here coming up, so I don't want to forego this money. I want to use this as a down payment on my new house. Bummer, right? Because then it burned, and I think it was even more than a week. I think it was like 2 weeks or something like that. So then once John got that verbal from a guy that he's raised capital from before, likes, trusts, does business together, hey, good, we're good to go on this guy. He backed out. Unfortunate set of circumstances. It happens. Then John continues to work on the phones. He gets another guy again that he's worked with. The guy's good to go. He's been in real estate deals before with and without John, so he's well versed. Again, the guy's like, cool, I looked over the pitch deck. I like the deal. I'm good to go. And then another 10 days, 2 weeks goes by, and one of his other deals gets like hung up with a lot of different issues where the guy's not as experienced as we are. He doesn't have hundreds of deals. Maybe he's done like 10 or 15, but To an experienced investor, the types of issues that he was having are not that big of a deal. But to someone that doesn't do this full time, I could see why that would be a strain on them. And ultimately, he's like, hey, I love the deal. I want to do it, but I just can't. This deal is taking up too much of my time. So as it sits right now, we are 1 day away from closing. We were looking to raise $400,000 for 33% equity in the deal with an 8% preferred return. So 8% cash on cash return to be paid in quarterly payments, and then 33% of the deal overall. And we were not able to get that done prior to closing, which was a little bit of a bummer for sure. But again, real estate works out in crazy different ways, so not upsetting. What we're doing, John's covering half, I'm covering half. We're basically needing like $155,000. I can tell you exactly. We put down $25,000 earnest money, and then each of us are putting about $67,000 in. So it's about $159-ish thousand for closing. John Heiser's putting in half. I'm putting in half. We'll close on it. We'll continue to raise money. We have a lot of interested people still. And what I think will happen is that we will be able to piece this deal together instead of getting it from one investor. I think that there will be upwards of 4 people, maybe 2, maybe 3 people, hopefully still 1 person in this deal overall. So tons of lessons were learned. Capital raising is very tough. It can get squirrely like that. People get cold feet. The retrade was great for the deal overall, and I learned a whole ton about leasing and tenants and everything like that. So I think I broke that down enough individually there. Very excited. This is my first commercial deal. We're closing on it any day now. I'm signing my closing docs tomorrow on the 18th. The closing is the 19th of September. So very excited to get this first deal done. And then fingers crossed, hopefully tenant 1 forks his security deposit over, because unfortunately, just having a signed lease isn't good enough. Once that money is exchanged, that's when that lease goes into effect. So I'm really hoping there's going to be no issues with that. That's the only thing, the dark cloud hanging over my head. However, we know this, that every problem has a solution. So it would be just a minor bump in the road if this guy wants to play that. However, after meeting him yesterday, seeing what he's done to the property already, he's been taking care of it really well, cleaned up a lot of stuff. I doubt that is going to be the case. So, boys and girls, that wraps up episode 5. I still have to do a Thunderbird update, which I was supposed to do this episode, but many things happened in between then and there since the last episode. So, all right, boys and girls, that was it. That's a wrap. Please like this podcast, share it, rate me, leave me a review, follow me on Instagram, john.kleisch. I'll put everything in the description below. I will be doing a lot of more updating on that platform via Instagram. So if you guys see that or find that anyone else would get value from this podcast, please share it with them. That would mean a lot. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it so far. Follow me along on this journey. Number 1 is down in the books. Not quite yet. I guess I shouldn't say that. It's very, very close to being down in the books, and we'll continue to get more. Until next time, see you guys.